Hello once again, everybody. Thank you for joining me here on this special edition of Bang the Book Radio. We're going to break down UFC 236 with Christian Pina of the Sports Gambling Podcast. As I mentioned here, over the spring and summer, we're going to do some of these one-off shows for UFC, Triple Crown, Masters, all kinds of different stuff to go along with the Bettor's Box, my MLB betting podcast, every Monday and Thursday. Christian, how's it going today, man?
Good, man. I was going to say I missed you for the week off, but we're doing the back end of the home and home now. Had you on because I couldn't go a week without talking to you, buddy. But UFC is back, and it's a great time to be in the sport, man. We had like 8, 9 in a row, took a week off, and now we're back with another run of every single week.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Thanks for getting me on your show last week and got you back on my show here this week. So I feel a little bit more normal being in the host chair here this time around. I know that's got to be something interesting for you too, with all the shows that you host and all the shows that you're on.
Yeah, it's a little bit different, when I do radio around town in Vegas at different sports books or podcasts, and then, do the weekly one myself. But again, man, you are the consummate host professional, so don't let anybody ever tell you different. But I want to give people the opportunity to kind of get your story, because when you host so much, you kind of put yourself in the background, and I think you were such a bright baseball mind that needed to be kind of shown and showcased there. So pleasure was all mine as always, my friend.
I appreciate it, man. Anytime you want to rap about anything on your show or on my show, definitely up for it here. And speaking of rap, I guess that's maybe a pretty good segue into this week's UFC event down in Atlanta, Georgia at State Farm Arena. 2 interim title fights here on the card, 5 fights on pay-per-view, 4 on ESPN, 4 on UFC Fight Pass. They're all digital networks. So overall, Christian, again, we had last week off. So, are they kind of loading up for this card then?
I would say that, that it was intentional that they're loading up. I think they just kind of needed to take a break when they kind of front loaded the new ESPN schedule. But I mean, when you look at this card top to bottom, as by doing this together, I think, there's usually one specific theme to a UFC event for whatever reason. I don't know why they do it that specific way. This card's theme is really one fighter is much more well-rounded, perhaps. But if you bet on said favorite or more well-rounded fighter, you're going to be holding your breath the entire way, because every one of these underdogs has one specific skill set at least that can end a fight, within any given second, one punch, one takedown, one submission, despite whatever has been going on throughout the fight and through each round. So it'll be a really interesting kind of very live underdog, but one specific path to victory, I would say, for that underdog.
Now, in terms of the way that this card is structured, I think it's very interesting because, we talked about this before here on the segments that it seems like there's always a quote-unquote main event of the Fight Pass card. And it looks like a pretty good one here, actually. It's in Curtis Millender and Bilal Muhammad. We'll talk about that fight here in a little bit. But in terms of the 5 fights on the main card here, I mean, is this a nonstop action type of pay-per-view card, or is this more of a technically sound main card?
I think the 2 co-main events, should be nonstop action, maybe a little bit, when we break this down from a broad perspective. This is what I'm talking about. Max Holloway, Dustin Poirier. Holloway, in my estimation, the much more well-rounded fighter, but Dustin Poirier with wins over Justin Gaethje, knockout wins at that, Eddie Alvarez. If you bet on Holloway, you're going to be petrified of those hands of Dustin Poirier. You look at Adesanya, probably the more well-rounded fighter, but Gastelum could take this fight to the ground, and you never know if no one has ever been able to get in close to even try it, but that is, a path to victory for a live underdog. You look at Rountree Anders, Rountree kind of came up as a wrestler. Anders kind of came up as, a wrestler as well, but had much more power in the hands. Rountree kind of has shifted his game into a kill or be killed mentality, which has had mixed results. So if you bet on a favorite Anders, you just don't know if Rountree's going to go up there and say, this is my new style, let's go, and kind of see what happens on that front. When you look on down through the card, I mean, Pauliana Botello has the most, finishing capabilities in 125 pounds, which is a little bit of breath, a breath of fresh air. I believe 7 out of 8 of her wins via knockout. So as you go on down through this line, I mean, Max Griffin, Zilly Medimov is the same exact way. And as you touched on with Millender and Muhammad, in my estimation, a slightly more well-rounded aspect in every single area. But Millender has shown time and time again the propensity to throw a little Uriah Hall in his game, as I like to say, with the flying knees, all of that, and then on down and even to one of the first fights of the evening. Randy Costa has knocked out just about everyone within the first round, but Brandon Davis has shown to be incredibly durable and a decision machine. So on down through the line, the theme kind of overlaps throughout every single card here.
Well, and as you look at this main event here with Holloway and Poirier, I mean, they fought each other February 4th, 2012. So this is a rematch, a long time in the making, to say the least. And Let's start with this from the Holloway side, because it wasn't a good look last year for Max Holloway in the summer months. He was supposed to be on that one fight card, I believe, in Las Vegas, had the really strange interview. He got taken to the hospital. They thought that, maybe there were some concussion symptoms, something like that. And we all had a lot of questions going into that fight against Brian Ortega at UFC 231. And he passed that test with flying colors. So how do you evaluate him now? I mean, do you just assume he's kind of back to normal?
Well, here's the thing. It wasn't a good look. And so Holloway and Holloway's camp did the thing that they should have done. I don't think it was anything to do with concussion issues. I think he was draining his body to the point of complete shutdown, complete exhaustion. And Holloway's going to lightweight. This is the weight cut has always been the biggest issue in the world for Max Holloway. Now at 145, instead of trying to deplete his body, dehydrate his body to the point of death and exhaustion, there's a very real chance here that we get the best version we have ever seen of Max Holloway. Now, Max Holloway, the reason he did that so much to deplete his body is because of the size advantage that he had at that weight class. He still is going to maintain that size advantage throughout most of his opponents. He does give up about 3 inches of reach to Poirier, but when you look at this, he still has a 2-inch height advantage as well, a leg kick reach of about 2 inches. So Holloway isn't giving up as much kind of size to the bigger fighters in this division that I think a lot of people thought, or even maybe Holloway's camp thought. But this is the right move for him for career longevity. We have seen this from a guy like Daniel Cormier, who struggled with the weight cut. Look, Holloway was not going to be able to do that to his body anymore. And I know he's only 27, but as we saw time and time again, it was causing him to lose fights. It was causing him to lose money. It was causing him to lose health. So this could be, in theory, an improved gas tank from Holloway, which was always, even at that level of depletion, probably the best in the division, definitely, maybe even in UFC, maybe even an increase in power. So this really could be the best version of Max Holloway. So he did kind of everything that you would want to see from this. Now, is it technically still an unknown of how he fares at that weight? Sure. But in my estimation, I don't see a downside. We saw this with Cormier. We've seen it with Gastelum. We've seen it time and time again. When guys kind of make that jump, it's genuinely a very good career decision for them. Now, Dustin Poirier, look, this is exactly what I talked about. He has, look, Holloway to me is a very high fight IQ guy, something in the like of a Tyron Woodley, a Daniel Cormier, these incredible, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, these guys with huge fight IQs. And those are the type of guys I gravitate towards. Poirier, not that he doesn't have a great fight IQ, but he is looking for the knockout. He's a little bit of the Justin Gaethje Alvarez mold. He wants to entertain fans, be UFC's most dangerous man. That's great. And as we saw, sometimes that will work against a high fight IQ, as we just saw Stephen Wonderboy Thompson upset. But to me, Holloway is just leaps and bounds mentally and fight aspect wise above. When we talk about the fact that they fought before, that was not this version of Max Holloway or even Dustin Poirier. And so, as I always like to talk about fights that have already happened, you really cannot take anything away from that version of each other.
So are you laying the number with Holloway here then?
It's a big number, the minus 210, but, a 50% ROI does make some sense here. To me, this fight is probably going to the championship rounds, and over 2.5 at minus 150 to me would make a little bit more sense, only because I don't see I don't see this being a crazy Jose Aldo, Conor McGregor type of situation with an 11-second knockout or anything like that. I think both guys, especially Holloway, with this improved gas tank, improved weight, and even more weight on him, are going to look to feel each other out. And even if a knockout does happen, I see it kind of or a submission, whatever the case may be, 3-4, maybe the 5th round. But I think a Holloway decision is the most likely. But Poirier's hands, again, if you bet these numbers that look enticing, Poirier can ruin a night in a very quick fashion with the hands that he has.
All right, so we move to the middleweight interim championship fight here. Kelvin Gastelum, Israel Adesanya. And, for Adesanya, I mean, look, I'm happy to see him get this chance. I think this is a chance that he deserves. Now, can he take the spotlight and actually run with it?
Yeah, look, I may be a little bit biased here because I have been on the Israel Adesanya cash bandwagon since his inception into the UFC. I think he is special. I think he has a chance to be the next John Jones. When you look at this kid physically, it is the mirror image of John Jones. And I know that was kind of always the moniker that was put on him. It's just when you look at this, I mean, we're talking about a guy with an 80-inch reach. That is a 9.5 reach advantage over Kelvin Gastelum. Leg 5 inches. Adesanya does one thing great. And I don't say only one thing, but the thing that makes Adesanya so special, like a guy like Jones, is the ability to strike at range. nobody has been able to get in close to Gastelum to even test the chin, to even, try to get takedowns, because his get-up game is, top of the world right now. Look, I think Adesanya is special. I think this is his moment, and I think people are really forgetting there was a time when nobody looked more disinterested to be in a UFC octagon than Kelvin Gastelum. Gastelum has folded time and time again when the lights are the brightest, and I think a minus 180, it's a little bit of the bottom of the market to me, honestly, only because, again, all of those red flags with Gastelum, Adesanya nobody has shown the blueprint on how to beat him, but look, nobody has really shown the blueprint on how to beat a guy like Jon Jones. And I don't want to sit here and say I want to compare these two fighters now, but if Adesanya keeps this trajectory, which is a, once in a generation type fighter, he really, the blueprint may just not be out there because it is so hard to get in close. I mean, again, a 9-inch reach advantage is so difficult to even infiltrate, to try to stop, let alone you pair him with an impeccable get up game from takedowns. And it's going to be very hard to stop him here. I really think this is Adesanya's moment. He deserves it. And he's going to be special in the UFC for a very long time.
So Adesanya here, 5-0 in his UFC career. Wilkinson, Vettori, Tavares, Brunson, and Silva, the victims that he's taking care of here. How much of a step up is Kelvin Gastelum for Adesanya here? I mean, how big of a test is this?
Look, Gastelum is a guy like I said, is somebody to me that I just don't trust. Now, when you look at this, Gastelum does have the speed. He does have the power, to maybe put Adesanya away. But again, nobody has even gotten close enough. He is, without a doubt, Anderson Silva, look, when you put the careers, back to back, there is no comparison that Silva is the more accomplished guy, right? He's, in the greatest of all time conversation. That being said, in current form, Gastelum is far and away the best, type of competition. It's just he's, the best, I want to say on paper, because that's almost a disservice. It's just Gastelum is a guy that has never been able to get over this hump. And I don't see, it's just a little bit, unfortunate for him that it is a guy like Adesanya on this trajectory that has passed every single test with flying colors. I mean, again, if Adesanya was, think of it in terms of his spread. What is he doing? Is he outperforming his market expectation? How is he looking in doing that, in beating these guys? Yeah, he's kind of taken it a little bit easy. I don't want to say taking it easy, but, maybe had a couple of decision wins when you would have liked him to put him away in the first round. But to me is playing it safe. That is getting out of there with a win, which is the end goal within UFC. So Gastelum, yes, he is the quote unquote biggest challenge and biggest step up, but I just don't think that highly of a guy like Kelvin Gastelum, despite of it.
All right, so we move to this light heavyweight fight here between Eryk Anders and Khalil Rountree. And I think from an athleticism standpoint, this is probably the most interesting fight of the night.
Which one fight is that? Sorry, you cut out for a second.
Oh, sorry about that. Looking at this light heavyweight fight here between Eryk Anders and Khalil Rountree, I guess this is probably the most athletic fight of the night, and that adds a lot of intrigue to it.
Yeah, and again, a little bit, this card is a little special to me because it has a lot of guys that I feel very highly about. Look, Eryk Anders, all of a sudden losing 3 out of his last 4, although I really do maintain that he beat Lyoto Machida. That being said, look, for those who don't know, Eryk Anders won a national championship at Alabama as a starting middle linebacker. He was not just there in the background. He played every single snap. Anders is a freak Division I wrestler. He's on the wrestling team there, won all kinds of awards. On the other side, Khalil Rountree is somebody, again, I'm a little bit, I think is somewhat overrated. Now, Rountree came into the sport as something of a wrestling first, type of fighter, using his hands only as defense, only as, secondary nature when needed. That has really changed for him. He has kind of adopted the, for the fans, Justin Gaethje, Alvarez, Poirier model of kill or be killed. And like Gaethje, like Poirier, like Alvarez, he's had mixed results. He knocked out a legendary kickboxer in Gokhan Saki, yet he got starched by a vicious, knockout by hyper prospect Johnny Walker. Kill or be killed is going to be, it's one of those things that, is this just his newfound fan-friendly style to, because he realized he fought a little bit quote unquote boring, and even his style when it was the most boring may not have, been enough to eventually keep his job. And an exciting guy will always have a place in UFC. And again, look no further than the guys I just mentioned, like Gaethje, who was, very much a sub 500 fighter. Yet here we go again with the Gaethje hype train of kill or be killed. So is it, adapting a new style? That remains to be seen. This could be, this fight could go a bunch of different ways here. This could be something of a boring wrestling match for 3, straight rounds. This could be something of a, fire fest. I tend to lean towards the latter, and I think that both guys are going to want to stand and bang. Both guys are proud. I think that this, Rountree is really making this transition to, be more fan friendly of a knockout type of artist. And Eryk Anders, to me, despite the losses along the way, has more path to victory. Anders is just, by default, the best, better wrestler. And I think he has the better hands. He's more concise. The thing is here, if Anders plays it a little bit timid, waits for his opening too long, Rountree could open up, but Rountree has had some serious cardio issues in the past, while Anders has shown he can go the distance. So to me, this one is Eryk Anders, but if this one doesn't go right for him, this could, be the cautionary tale of a hyper prospect getting too much too soon, like we saw with Ngannou against Stipe, Anders versus Machida, and so on down the line. So it's a little bit of an interesting matchup, but I would favor Anders here.
Well, and I think something about Anders that does, it is worth mentioning, is that his 2 losses late in 2018, I mean, he fought 3 times from August 25th to December 8th. So, maybe it was just, too quick of a turnaround type of thing for him. Now he's had about 5 months since that last fight.
Yeah, and I think sometimes you need that reset, right? Again, not to compare the two, but we saw this with Francis Ngannou. Sometimes you just need to take a step back, see what went wrong. Was it too much too soon? Were you taking people lightly? Did you just think you were on top of the world and untouchable? Those are all in the realm of, possibilities, but it can be a very hard thing for a fighter to, that's why you always got to look for that first UFC loss when it's an undefeated, hyped prospect, because it's human nature to kind of, take that as it comes. And adversity can be a very scary thing. And so, a guy like Anders, I think the time off will serve him well as he goes through this progression of his career.
All right, so we got 2 other fights on the main card here, one in the welterweight division, one in the light heavyweight division. Anything on either one of those fights stand out to you?
Truly not really. Ovin St. Preux and Nikita Krylov are 2 guys I do not think very highly of. They did fight just a few years ago when OSP introduced the world to the Von Flue choke, which was, out of obscurity at that point. He's kind of made it his WWE finishing move now. But Krylov is, coming back for the first time in a while, and OSP is a guy that, to me, you fade him against the upper echelon, and he's somebody, nobody beats bad fighters better, and nobody beats bad fighters with more flash than a guy like OSP. We've seen this kind of time and time again with him. To me, he's just very untrustworthy. So is Krylov. So I really don't have much there for you. Montel Jackson and Sukumtoth, look, I mean, a minus 550 favorites for Montel Jackson. I think that's more of a when and not if type of scenario. I think a Jackson by submission type of prop probably makes some sense. I'm trying to look at the round prop. Under 2.5 even likely makes some sense as well there. But the last 2 on the main card, not a ton there in terms of betting value.
All right, so we go to the prelim card here on ESPN. I know that there were a couple of fights that kind of stood out to you here on this part of the show.
Yeah, as we look down through this again, overwhelming theme here, and I guess we'll just start at the bottom and work our way up. Randy Costa, Brandon Davis. Again, a guy I do not think is I don't think very highly of in a guy like Brandon Davis. Now, when you look at on the other side with a guy like Randy Costa, look, Costa 4-0 UFC, undefeated amateur is, had some issues out there, but look, he's 8-0. He has, 8 first-round knockouts. He is just been an absolute killer. Davis is cutting down to 135 pounds. And to me, look, this is, like we said, Brandon Davis, he's definitely the more experienced. He's definitely been in there with the upper echelon. I don't want to see upper echelon, just better type of opponent than Randy Costa, because Randy Costa has beat absolutely nobody. I certainly get that. I mean, you look at Costa's opponents' records, 0-4, 0-0, 5-9, 0-1. That being said, he is, absolutely starched everyone. Davis has shown that he is very durable. You look back at the fights with Kyle Bochniak, and he's been able to kind of win wars of attrition and grit. And despite kind of being outsized all the way through, now you're going to ask him to drop even more weight down to 135. Look, Davis doesn't do anything really great. This is one of the reasons it kind of pains me to say this, because I think he's great for the sport. But a guy like Kyle Bochniak, to me, is the same thing. Doesn't really do anything great, but you can make a great living for yourself by being incredibly durable and putting on entertaining fights. I just don't see that in Davis. I think he's even, a much worse version of that. So I think that Costa probably comes out here. Davis has been so durable. I think that he can weather the storm. But Costa eventually, in my estimation, puts him away late for a little bit of an underdog play out there at the plus 140. Next up, Curtis Millender, Bilal Muhammad. We talked about that one. Muhammad minus 145. Why? Because he is the more well-rounded fighter. So Melinder, though, we talked about this. We talked about him when he was going up against Zaleski last time out. I did pick Zaleski in that fight, did bet Zaleski. Curtis Melinder, this is the thing. I mean, he is a little bit wild, a little bit of a, I don't say a little bit, a much better version, but he has the finishing power out of nowhere, like a guy like Uriah Hall. And so he can finish a fight from absolutely any position. You'll see vicious head kicks. You'll see spinning back kicks. You'll see everything and anything. And so if you bet on a guy like Muhammad, who does not have finishing power, is a decision machine, point fights and fights his smart type of fight, which I absolutely love. Muhammad makes some sense here, but you're going to be holding your breath for the knockout of Melinder from bell to bell, regardless of what happens here. And then probably my favorite play on this card here as we go over to Jalen Turner, Matt Frevola. Jalen Turner minus 125, Frevola over at minus 105. This to me is a little bit of a mismatch, and it's one of those things when you have a line that kind of differs a lot from what you think. You kind of think, what am I doing wrong? Completely understand that here. But when we look at this, Jalen Turner is been, absolutely incredible to me. And when I look at his tape, I just, he's so much bigger, first of all, than Frevola, giving up 6 inches of height to Turner. I mean, that cannot be understated first and foremost. And it's the matchup, styles make fights. You'll hear me say that over and over. Frevola is in trouble here. Look, he relies on durability. Doesn't have good technique, doesn't do really anything great. And when you're facing a guy that's 6 inches taller who hits like a truck, I just think this is a recipe for a when and not if type of fight. And I don't think Frevola has the skills to get in close to land takedowns, which could be kind of his, path to victory here, because Turner should be able to tag him in and along the way here. So I don't, unless there's a fluke trip, Frevola is able to get on top and sit on him for a round or that type of stuff, because Turner doesn't have the greatest mat game, while Frevola certainly kind of has an edge there. I just see this one as something of a mismatch and an eventual knockout for a guy like Jalen Turner here in that situation.
One more fight I want to touch on here. It's the only women's fight on the card. This one, Lauren Mueller taking this fight, and it was originally supposed to be Paige Van Zandt, but apparently she's got a fractured arm, so she's unable to go here, and Mueller finds herself a pretty big underdog in this one.
Yeah, and this is a good test for a girl like Polyana Botello. And as I stated, Botello is kind of bringing finishing power to the 125-pound division. Now, do I think it's a breath of fresh air and good for the sport? Yeah, but as you know, I like to bet women's overs for the exact opposite reason. So she's kind of screwing some things up there. But maybe get a little bit of value as she goes up. Look, Botello 7-2. All but one via knockout of her victories. It's absolutely been incredible to see in a vicious body kick, not just fluke type of stuff against the gas cans of the world. 33-second vicious body kick to Suri Kondo. And so she's been able to kind of do it all here. Look, I would have, because of how they matched up stylistically, I don't know. I didn't see what this line would have been against Paige Van Zandt, but this would have been. And again, I was on Paige when the situation was right on her, the ESPN debut. They gave her a matchup tailor-made. This would have been a bloodbath for a girl like Botello against Van Zandt, because that's just not Van Zandt's game. It's really not. So Botello's the bigger, the better striker, 3-inch height advantage, more experience. She is pretty much better everywhere. So to me, this makes a lot of sense for the line to be where it is. It's a good test for a girl like Botello. Lauren Mueller has certainly, been around the block a little bit here, but coming in on short notice is definitely tough against a knockout artist, 125-pound division, Polyana Botello.
Well, we got a great UFC 236 preview over at BangTheBook.com, written by Christian Pina. You can follow him on Twitter at Christian Pina, Pina, and also check out his sports gambling podcast as well. Christian, appreciate the time as always, man. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you again real soon.
All right, buddy. Good luck and enjoy the fights.
And there you go. There's Christian Pina breaking down UFC 236 with us. Make sure you tune in on Monday for another edition of the Bettor's Box, my MLB betting podcast. That'll do it for me. Thank you so much for listening, everybody, and I'll talk to you again on Monday.